Mr. Cooper and then Ms. Khalid.
Mr. Cooper, on the motion
Yes.
as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a motion that Canadians, frankly, deserve to see in the way of transparency on the part of this government. The fact that Minister Sajan was offered and accepted tickets to a concert, the Taylor Swift concert, is a classic, straight-up conflict of interest. The minister accepted tickets from PAVCO, a provincial Crown corporation. PAVCO receives funding from the federal government, including $116 million in the past year with respect to upgrades to BC Place in advance of the World Cup. The Conflict of Interest Act is crystal clear that no public office holder or member of his or her family shall accept any gift or other advantage that might reasonably be seen to have given to influence the public office holder in the exercise of an official power, duty, or function. Mr. Chair, here you have a public office holder, Minister Sajan, accepting a gift for himself and for his daughter from a Crown corporation that seeks federal funding, that has received federal funding from a minister who sits at the cabinet table that makes decisions about whether to fund that Crown corporation. That is a conflict of interest. The fact that the minister, after he got caught, suddenly said, oops, I'm going to return the ticket, doesn't end the matter. That's not good enough. He got caught. That's the only reason he decided at the 11th hour not to attend. The fact of the matter remains that he was offered the ticket, he accepted the ticket, and we need to know about exactly how that took place, and there needs to be a level of accountability. And it is frankly reflective of a pattern of conflicts of interest and ethical lapses within this government. Minister Sajan would not be alone in putting himself in a position to violate the Conflict of Interest Act because, after all, his boss, the Prime Minister, the serial lawbreaker, has broken the Conflict of Interest Act not once but twice, the first Prime Minister in Canadian history to do so. And that brings me to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister attended the Taylor Swift concert in Toronto. Tickets were going for, in some cases, thousands of dollars.
I'm sorry.
I see the bells.
I'm sorry, Mr. Cooper. I'm obligated at this point that the bells are ringing to seek unanimous consent of the committee. Is it a quorum call?
It's not flashing no more.
Okay, because they're not flashing. Okay, so continue, Mr. It looked like a quorum call. Go ahead, continue, Mr. Cooper.
Mr. Chair, that brings me to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister accepted tickets, or according to his version of events, bought tickets to the Taylor Swift concert in Toronto. Tickets for that concert were reportedly cost in the thousands of dollars, at minimum $1,500, some tickets going for thousands more. And the Prime Minister would have Canadians believe that he purchased those tickets. It was out of his own pocket. Well, if that is the case, then why is it that the Prime Minister and his office have refused to answer basic questions around the Prime Minister's attendance at the concert? the Prime Minister and his office have refused to disclose how much he paid for the tickets, when they were purchased, how many tickets did he purchase? If the Prime Minister, in fact, had purchased the tickets, wouldn't he be eager to say, I bought the tickets on such and such a day, and I paid such and such amount? Here are the receipts. There's nothing to see here. I simply went and attended a concert out of my own pocket. Mr. Chair, that would be what anyone would do if, in fact, they paid for the concert. The fact that the Prime Minister has been anything but transparent raises serious questions, and I would note that the record of the Prime Minister raises even more questions because, as I noted, this is a Prime Minister who is a serial lawbreaker. He is a Prime Minister who has violated the Conflict of Interest Act multiple times, investigated multiple times, and not only that, but the Prime Minister is a proven liar.
That's right. Here, here.
He is an absolute liar.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to ask Mr. Cooper to be a little more judicious in his language. Go ahead. And on your point of order, go ahead.
That was exactly my
Thank you.
point, Chair. That's
you.
very unparliamentary language.
Be a
It
little-
would
be a
be
little
really,
more-
really upsetting for that member if I called him a liar,
But you're not going to do that, are you, Ms. Khalid?
because I respect the rules of this House and this place.
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Well, it's too bad that we have such an ethically challenged Prime Minister. We live in the greatest country in the world with the worst Prime Minister this country has ever seen.
That's right.
Again,
And-
point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead on your point of order.
I don't see what that has to do with this motion. I think casting judgment on how good or bad somebody is doesn't really help us in getting through the orders of the day
Well,
today.
well,
It is absurd.
okay.
I could exactly call
I
that member
understand-
the
I
worst
understand your
person in
point
the
of
world.
order.
I'm not going to do that. I will keep my thoughts to myself. I think,
understand.
again, it's
I
very
understand your point of
unparliamentary
order, Mr.
language
Cooper.
for
You
that
have the
member to be
floor.
going down this path.
You know,
Just hang on a sec, okay? So let's keep the train on the rails here. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor. Go ahead.
I will note, Mr. Chair, that the Prime Minister has necessitated this motion, or at least part of a motion as it pertains to him, because all he has to do is show us the receipts, demonstrate that there's nothing to see here. But he hasn't done that, and so what we have is smoke, and where there's smoke, there's fire. And as I noted, added to that is the Prime Minister's multiple ethical breaches, his law breaking, his lying, and so taken together, we need
Order,
to
Mr.
get.
Chair, you already asked him to stop with the lying.
Well, he's not lying. He's talking about Justin Trudeau lying.
Okay,
he's
so,
lying too.
Mr. Fisher, I got your point of order. Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
Well, and so taken together, this motion needs to be passed. We need to see the records. We need to see if the Prime Minister is, once again, breaking the law, violating the Conflict of Interest Act, lying and gaslighting Canadians, and with respect to Minister Sejan, now that he's been caught, we need to understand exactly what transpired, leading him into a position where he broke the Conflict of Interest Act.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Ms. Khalid, go ahead, please. On the motion as amended.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the points that Mr. Cooper made that I think really contradict exactly what he's trying to say. Mr. Cooper quoted the Conflict of Interest Act and what really makes a conflict of interest to be real. Now, we've seen, in fact, this committee has tried in the past to study that Conflict of Interest Act and to study exactly how 79% of conservatives, or the total expenses of accommodations and using public funds to go to partisan party conventions, how can we make sure that the Conflict of Interest Act creates that safety net for taxpayers? So, and I will quote here, a loophole in the House of Commons spending rules has allowed MPs traveling to party conventions to bill taxpayers for more than $500,000 over the past year, even though House of Commons rules normally prohibit MPs from charging expenses linked to partisan political activity. Since May 2023, MPs have charged to the House of Commons $538,314 in travel, accommodation, meals, and incidental costs associated with attending caucus meetings held in connection with party conventions, including more than $84,000 for travel by designated travelers, often MPs' spouses. Expense claims filed to the Senate by 7 conservative senators for travel accommodation and per diems added another $26,293 to the total. As I said, conservative MPs racked up 79% of the spending by MPs. They billed the House $426,283 to attend a caucus meeting associated with the Conservative Party's policy convention in Quebec City in 2023, including $331,699 for travel, $71,408 for accommodation, and $21,053 for meals and incidentals. Conservative, and this is a very, very important point, Conservative MPs were the only ones to bill Parliament for spouses' travel to a caucus meeting connected to a party convention during that time period. Now, it's so interesting that, you know, Mr. Cooper would have you do as he says, but not as he does. And that goes for all of his conservative colleagues. Yeah, you know, we'll get, Mr. Chair, I think he has a point of order.
It's a joke he wants.
Like I heard, but I don't think you really do have a point of order.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'll continue.
Yeah.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre did not file an expense claim to the House of Commons from his MP's budget for travel to Quebec City. I find that to be quite troubling, that we, in fact, all of our committee commits to talking about and to working on ethics rules in the House, talking about the conflict of interest rules. And what has Mr. Cooper done? Well, he made sure, him and his party, made sure that that motion never saw the light of day in this committee. It was presented. We talked about it. And what did they do? No, don't do as I say. Well, don't, whatever that saying is, Chair. And then, oh, thank you. Do as I say, not as I do. Thank you so much. I would love a bigger round of applause. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. I will also point out that, you know, it's maybe a trivial matter to some, but I've seen, you know, when we get these Jubilee pins or King's Little medals to give out to our constituents, I always find it weird when MPs wear them themselves, because, I mean, I always thought these were taxpayer dollars that were spent to buy these medals or these little pins that we then give to our constituents. Now, if an MP wears them, are they now misusing taxpayer dollars? It's a question. It's a very valid question. You should ask Mr. Williamson. So that's absurd. That is not absurd at all.
Okay, I don't want
Mr.
I don't
Chair,
want the
I would like an apology
crosstalk. I
for
don't want
that
the
comment.
crosstalk.
That's not right.
I would like an
Okay.
apology for that comment, Mr. Chair.
For what?
He called me
Called her
absurd.
absurd.
I don't.
Indeed, I did.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay, well.
Those
I can't force
those
him.
medals
I can't.
are part of the order of precedence, and anyone who receives one, just like anyone who receives a decoration from the vice regal
or for their service in the Canadian Armed Forces is absolutely entitled to wear them, and to say otherwise is preposterous. Okay. So no, it's not an abuse of taxpayer money for anyone who receives a decoration that's in the official order of precedence to wear it, any more than it is for the Vice-Regal, the Governor General of Canada, to wear their medal. So it's an absurd comment.
So thank you for that, Mr. Barrett. I actually did read the order of precedence last week as it relates to the King's Coronation Medal, and you're quite right on that. But go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
But sorry, I have a quick point of order.
Go ahead, Mr.
Feeling that someone's comment is absurd is a whole lot different than saying you are absurd. And I would ask Mr. Barrett if he would apologize for that comment.
No. He's already said he's not going to apologize. So go ahead, Ms. Khalid. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm not very surprised. Rudeness is quite common in some places. I was making a point about the perception of how taxpayer dollars are used. I'm sorry that he got so offended. Oh, look, I can apologize, which is fine. But I will perhaps also talk about a Hungarian think tank that was run by a Conservative MP that used taxpayer dollars to spend tens of thousands of dollars on sponsored travel all across the world. And if we take a look to see who benefits from sponsored travel, and in fact, this is something that we had tried to study in this committee as well, is how should sponsored travel be used, and should MPs be entitled to take taxpayer dollars to go and spend across the world, or should those taxpayer dollars be staying here in Canada? If we're so worried about how taxpayer dollars are used, about how the Conflict of Interest Act applies, then we need to make sure that we have a well-rounded approach to how that happens. Not just to say that, oh, if you're a Liberal, therefore you must be violating something.
Point of order. We are sitting over here very quietly listening when they were speaking, and every time that ICRA says something that they don't agree with, they commiserate amongst themselves and make a noise. Could we just?
I do. I hear Mr. Barrett, please. So I hear talking on this side. I don't think it's disrupting the meeting. If it was disrupting the meeting, Mr. Fisher, then I would call it out. But it's quite common, and I've heard it from your side where conversations happen. So, Ms. Khalid, go ahead on the floor. If it becomes disruptive, I've called it out in the past, and I'll continue to call it out. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Thank you, Chair. And, you know, I find it, again, really telling why all of a sudden there are big whispers and there are potential disruptions in this committee, because they don't want to hear what I have to say. They don't want to study, as we have tried with the help of the Bloc, with the help of the NDP, to try to study all of these issues in a very nonpartisan way, to say, look, we have an issue with the Conflict of Interest Act potentially. We have a way here in this committee to review that said act based on what kind of transactions have happened in the past by whether it's Conservatives or anyone else. And yet, I've been, as Mr. Villemure said, I have sat on this committee year after year listening to a whole bunch of hay and not getting any work done. Not any work done. How many reports have we really tabled so far, Mr. Chair? And that, I think, is really unfortunate, because there is a lot of good work that needs to be done in this committee. And Mr. Cooper outlined it himself. We need to study the Conflict of Interest Act and what is violating that Conflict of Interest Act. And if there are members on that side that are in clear violation as reported, then we need to study that too. It can't just be, oh, this minister or that PM, and calling them names every single day. To what objective? If we are really trying to do something here, if we are really trying to make positive change to better protect taxpayer dollars, to better have a Conflict of Interest Act that suits the needs of taxpayers and Canadians, then open it up. Have that nonpartisan conversation. Why is it that we always have to insert the politics? be toxic. And I have received so much of that toxicity, whether it's through Facebook Live videos, terrible tweets that get put out against me, my office address being
Ms.
released.
Khalid, just hang on, I've got a point of order.
So, Chair, on relevance, the motion deals with the Conflict of Interest Act. And this is important because the Conflict of Interest Act is something that this committee deals with.
That's not a point of order.
The conflict of interest, the code for members is dealt with by the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. So what Ms. Khalid is talking about is not germane to the motion, because what she's talking about could potentially fall under the code for members, but that would be the purview of the Procedure and House Affairs Committee. This deals exclusive. Why ministers and the Prime Minister only? Because they are the only ones subjected to the Act. So I'm sure that all members have read it, and they've been here for years and years. But everyone needs to understand that the member opposite needs to understand that what she's talking about betrays her absolute ignorance about the Act and the code.
Mr. Barrett, you made your point on the Act, the difference between the Act and the code. I appreciate that.
I do want to have a point on that same point of order, Chair.
I did not appreciate the last part of it.
That's the definition of
I mean, Chair, I am just as capable of calling people names. I refrain myself because I have respect for this committee and this place.
Ms. Khalid, hang on a sec, okay?
This is the second or third time he's done it today, Chair. Just today. Just today.
Mr. Chair,
I would prefer it as in a different tone, in a different context, Mr. Barrett, okay, to be fair.
Point of order.
I've got several point of orders here. Go ahead.
I had called a point just on that same point of order that Mr. Barrett has raised.
Can we just agree to?
No, Chair. I do want to make a point here.
Hang on a sec.
I'm not going
to you until I'm done. Okay. We just agree that we're going to get through this, and we're not going to go point counterpoint. This is not a Saturday Night Live skit. Okay. Let's just get through this without any assertions. Okay? Please. Ms. Khalid,
No,
go.
Brenda has a point of order and I have a point of order.
Well, I'm going to go to Mr. Fisher and then Ms. Shanahan on the points of order. Go ahead.
I get, Mr. Chair, that you want to see this go a little bit more smoothly, but when SO 18, Standing Order 18, which says you can't use offensive words against either house or against any member thereof, and you wipe it away by asking him not to do it again, and then he does it again.
I've asked him not to do it.
But he has to apologize for doing it.
I can't make him apologize, Mr. Fisher. I can't, okay? So I am trying to control this meeting as best I can.
By allowing him to get away with this.
Let me ask you a fair question, do I know what he's going to say until he says it? Does anybody in this room know that? So I can only deal with the words and the actions that are spoken.
Right.
Right.
Once they are spoken.
I'm dealing with it as best I can. I've asked everybody for some calm and to get through this motion as best we can without name calling on all sides, not just one side. Okay? So that's how I'm dealing with it. If you have a better suggestion, then let me know.
I will say that no one on this side has said anything close to offending Standing Order 18, like has been said by two of the three.
Fine. Ms. Shanahan, go ahead on your point of order.
Mr. Chair, I find that surprising that you claim that you don't have the power, the authority, to bring decorum to this committee, because indeed you do. You can demand that the member withdraw his comment. You asked him to apologize, and he refused to apologize. That's a direct challenge to you. You can then go further and ask him to withdraw his comments, and if he refuses to do that, then I think you need to take the next action, which is you take it from there.
Okay.
But if I were in your place, I would ask your whip to remove him as a member on this committee.
Okay, thank you for that intervention. I'm asking for decorum. I expect decorum from this point forward. I am not going to accept anything less than that, okay? And I'll deal with it if I have to.
I have the floor.
You go ahead with the floor. I see Mr. Maloney's hand up. I don't know what that's for. Mr. Maloney?
I was going to get involved in this point of order, but just add me to the speaking list, perhaps, please, Chair.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Khalid, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. As I was interrupted, I would like to clarify that at the beginning of my remarks, when I had first started, I had said that I was going to start by countering some of the points that Mr. Cooper had made in his remarks. And it was Mr. Cooper that was talking about Conflict of Interest Act, not myself. And I was, as he was talking, was making notes on exactly all of the instances where he was being quite hypocritical in his remarks. And so if I'm ignorant and you're hypocritical, then, you know, this is an eye for an eye and we'll make the world blind. I'm trying to get through this meeting. I'm trying to have a respectful conversation, and I'm trying to take the partisan politics out of the work that we do. We have, in so many ways, stepped away from the true meaning of this committee. And I know Mr. Villemure and I have had these conversations many times, when all I'm trying to do, Chair, is to see how we can better ensure that parliamentarians, all of them, conduct themselves in the manner that a parliamentarian should. And that doesn't just mean, you know, obeying all of the rules of the House, being respectful, not name-calling, making sure that conflict of interest, not just actual, but the perception of which does not happen. And I think that, and I have said this many times before in this committee, we need to do a fulsome review of how this is, instead of piecemeal here, piecemeal there, depending on whose political objective is being achieved here. Because that's not the role of this committee at all. And I think that we can do better. And again, I'm quite embarrassed by what Canadians would have watched today by the conduct of my colleagues here. I'll park my comments there, Chair.